What if everything you've been taught about learning is quietly holding you back because you were trained to memorize instead of understand, to follow instead of think, and to wait instead of create? And what if the real advantage in today's world doesn't belong to the smartest people or the most educated, but to those who know how to teach themselves anything, anytime, without permission? Because in a world overflowing with information, the true power is not access, it is control. Control over what you learn, how fast you learn it, and how effectively you turn it into results. And this is the hidden skill that separates those who stay stuck from those who continuously rise. Because while most people are drowning in content, scrolling endlessly, consuming passively, and confusing activity with progress, a small group of individuals are doing something very different. They are learning strategically, thinking critically, and applying relentlessly. And that difference changes everything, because learning is no longer about effort alone. It is about method. It is about understanding how your brain works, how to focus deeply, how to retain information, and most importantly, how to turn knowledge into action. Because knowledge without application is wasted potential, but knowledge applied with precision becomes power, income, and freedom. And this is where your life begins to shift, because the moment you realize that you don't need permission to learn, that you don't need a classroom, a degree, or a structured path, you step into a new level of control, where your growth is no longer limited by systems, but driven by your own curiosity, discipline, and strategy. And this is the moment you stop being a consumer of information and start becoming a creator of value. Because every skill you acquire increases your ability to solve problems. Every concept you master expands your thinking, and every insight you apply moves you closer to a life where you are no longer trading time for results, but leveraging knowledge to create opportunities. And this is why self-learning is not just a skill, it is the ultimate competitive advantage, because in a world that is constantly changing, the ability to learn faster than others is the ability to adapt faster, to earn faster, and to grow faster. And those who master this will never be left behind, because they can reinvent themselves again and again, no matter the circumstances. And as you step into this journey, understand this clearly: your future will not be defined by what you know today, but by how quickly and effectively you can learn tomorrow. Because the real question is not whether you are capable. The real question is whether you are willing to take control of your own education, your own growth, and your own success. And once you do, there is no limit to what you can achieve, because when you master the science of self-learning, you don't just change what you know. You change who you become and what your life is capable of producing moving forward. As you move deeper into the journey of self-learning, something powerful begins to shift inside you. And it is not just about acquiring knowledge anymore. It is about transforming the way you think, the way you approach problems, and the way you see your own potential. Because true self-learning is not a technique, it is an identity. It is the moment you stop waiting for permission to grow and start taking full ownership of your education, your skills, and ultimately your future. And this is where most people hesitate. Not because they lack intelligence, but because they are still subconsciously tied to the old system, the system where learning was dictated, structured, and controlled by someone else. But now you are stepping into a different reality, one where you are both the student and the teacher, the creator and the evaluator, the one who asks the questions and the one who must answer them. And that level of responsibility can feel overwhelming at first, but it is also where your greatest power lies, because when you take control of your learning, you take control of your growth, and when you take control of your growth, you take control of your results, including your financial future, because in today's world, knowledge is no longer locked behind institutions. It is available to anyone who is willing to seek it, organize it, and apply it effectively. And this is why the ability to teach yourself anything has become one of the most valuable skills you can develop, because it allows you to adapt, to evolve, and to stay relevant in a constantly changing world. And as Peter Hollins emphasizes through the principles of self-learning, The difference between those who succeed and those who struggle is not access to information. It is the ability to process, retain, and apply that information efficiently. And this is where most people fail, because they consume information passively. They read, they watch, they listen, but they do not engage, they do not question, they do not internalize. And as a result, the knowledge never truly becomes theirs. It remains surface level, easily forgotten, and rarely applied. But when you begin to engage actively with information, when you start asking deeper questions, when you challenge what you are learning and connect it to what you already know, something changes. Because now you are no longer just consuming knowledge, you are creating understanding. And understanding is what leads to mastery. And mastery is what creates value. And value is what generates income, and this is where self-learning connects directly to financial freedom. Because the more you can learn, the more you can adapt, the more skills you can acquire, and the more value you can provide. And in a world driven by value, those who can continuously learn and evolve will always have an advantage. And this is why one of the most important principles you must embrace is this. Higher income grows to the extent that you grow, because growth is not optional anymore, it is essential. And those who stop learning will eventually be left behind, not because they are incapable, but because they are unwilling to adapt. And as you continue to develop your self-learning abilities, you will begin to notice that your confidence increases, not just in your knowledge, but in your ability to acquire new knowledge. And this is a critical shift. Because confidence is not built on knowing everything, it is built on knowing that you can learn anything. And this belief changes how you approach challenges. Because instead of avoiding what you do not understand, you move toward it, you break it down, you analyze it, and you figure it out step by step. And this is where techniques like the Feynman method become incredibly powerful, because they force you to simplify complex ideas, to explain them in your own words, and to identify the gaps in your understanding. And this process is uncomfortable at times because it exposes what you do not know. That discomfort is exactly what leads to growth, because every gap you identify is an opportunity to improve, and every improvement compounds over time. And this compounding effect is what separates amateurs from experts, because experts are not those who never struggle. They are those who consistently refine their understanding, who continuously revisit the basics, and who are never satisfied with surface-level knowledge. And this mindset is what drives long-term success, because it ensures that you are always evolving, always improving, and always moving forward. And as you begin to integrate these principles into your daily life, you will start to see that learning is no longer something you have to force yourself to do. It becomes something you are naturally drawn to, because you begin to see the direct connection between what you learn and what you can achieve. And this is where intrinsic motivation takes over. Because now you are not learning for grades, for approval, or for external rewards. You are learning because it empowers you, because it gives you control, because it opens doors that were previously closed. And this is where autonomy becomes one of your greatest motivators, because you are no longer dependent on anyone else to tell you what to learn or how to learn it. You are directing your own path. And that freedom is incredibly powerful, because it allows you to align your learning with your goals, your interests, and your vision for the future. And this alignment is what makes learning sustainable, because when you are learning something that matters to you, something that contributes to your growth and your success, it no longer feels like work. It feels like progress. And this is where mastery begins to take shape, because mastery is not about perfection. It is about continuous improvement. It is about showing up consistently, refining your skills, and pushing yourself to understand things at a deeper level. And as you continue on this path, you will begin to see that the real advantage of self-learning is not just the knowledge you gain. It is the person you become in the process, because you develop discipline, you develop curiosity, you develop resilience, and these qualities extend far beyond learning. They influence every area of your life, including your financial decisions, your career choices, and your ability to create opportunities. And this is why self-learning is not just an educational skill, it is a life skill. It is a success skill, and ultimately it is a freedom skill, because when you can learn anything, you are no longer limited by what you currently know. You are only limited by how far you are willing to go. And as you continue to apply these principles, remember this powerful idea. Education is not preparation for life, education is life itself. And when you embrace this fully, when you commit to continuous learning and self-improvement, you will find that your potential is not fixed, it is expandable. It grows with every new skill you acquire, every concept you understand, and every challenge you overcome. And that is the true essence of self-learning. Not just acquiring knowledge, but unlocking the ability to continuously transform yourself and your future in ways you never thought possible. As you continue forward on this path of self-learning, something even more powerful begins to emerge, and that is your relationship with information itself starts to transform. Because at first, most people treat information like something to collect, something to consume, something to pile up in hopes that more knowledge will somehow lead to better results. But what Peter Hollins reveals is that the true advantage does not come from how much you consume. It comes from how deeply you engage, because information without interaction is just noise. And this is exactly where most learners fail. They confuse exposure with understanding. They believe that reading more, watching more, and listening more automatically makes them smarter. But in reality, without structured interaction, without questioning, without processing, that information never becomes usable knowledge. It remains fragmented, disconnected, and ultimately forgotten. And this is why one of the most important shifts you must make is from passive learning to active learning. Because active learning forces your brain to work, to struggle, to connect ideas. And it is precisely that effort that creates retention, that builds understanding, and that leads to mastery. And as highlighted in the book, methods like the SQ3R system are not just techniques, they are frameworks that train your mind to think differently, to approach information with purpose, with structure, and with intention. And when you begin to apply this, you realize that learning is not about starting at page 1 and moving forward blindly. It is about first stepping back, surveying the landscape, understanding the structure, asking the right questions, and then diving in with clarity. Because when you know what you are looking for, your brain becomes selective. It filters information more effectively, and it retains what matters most. And this is where your efficiency begins to increase dramatically. Because instead of wasting time on irrelevant details, you are focusing on the core principles, the key ideas, and the most impactful insights. And this is one of the most powerful financial freedom principles you can adopt, that efficiency of learning leads to efficiency of action. And efficient action leads to faster results, because time is your most valuable resource, and the faster you can learn, the faster you can adapt, and the faster you can execute, the greater your advantage becomes. And as you continue to refine this process, you begin to notice that your learning becomes more strategic, more intentional, and more results-driven, because you are no longer just absorbing information, you are extracting value from it. And this is where questioning becomes your greatest tool. Because the quality of your learning is directly proportional to the quality of your questions, and this is why techniques like elaborative interrogation are so powerful, because they force you to go beyond surface-level understanding. They push you to ask why, how, and what happens next. And these questions create depth, they create connections, and they reveal gaps in your understanding. And those gaps are not weaknesses. They are opportunities. They are signals that show you exactly where to focus your attention. And this is where growth accelerates. Because instead of wandering aimlessly through information, you are targeting your weaknesses, strengthening your knowledge, and building a solid foundation that supports everything you learn afterward. And this is what separates average learners from elite learners. Because elite learners are not afraid of what they do not know. They actively seek it out, they challenge themselves, and they use confusion as a guide rather than a barrier. And this mindset is what drives continuous improvement, because it ensures that you are always expanding your understanding, always refining your skills, and always moving forward. And as you begin to apply these principles consistently, you notice that your ability to retain information improves significantly, because retention is not about repetition alone. It is about meaningful engagement. It is about connecting new information to existing knowledge. And this is where techniques like the Feynman method become incredibly valuable. because they force you to simplify, to explain, and to truly understand what you are learning. And when you can explain something in simple terms, when you can break it down so clearly that anyone can understand it, that is when you know you have mastered it. And this is why one of the most powerful habits you can develop is teaching, even if you are only teaching yourself, because teaching forces clarity, it exposes gaps, and it strengthens understanding, and this is where your learning becomes truly powerful. Because you are no longer dependent on external validation, you are able to assess your own knowledge, to identify your own weaknesses, and to improve continuously. And this self-sufficiency is what leads to long-term success, because it allows you to learn anything, anytime, without relying on formal systems or external structures. And this is where self-learning becomes a competitive advantage, because in a world where information is abundant, the ability to process, understand, and apply that information effectively is what sets you apart. And this is especially important when it comes to financial freedom, because the marketplace rewards those who can learn quickly, adapt rapidly, and create value consistently. And this is why continuous learning is directly tied to income growth, because the more you learn, the more problems you can solve, the more value you can provide, and the more opportunities you can create. And this is why one of the most important quotes to internalize is this: "Knowledge is not power, applied knowledge is power," because knowledge alone does nothing. It is only when you apply it, when you turn it into action, when you use it to create results, that it becomes valuable. And this is where your focus must always remain, not just on learning, but on applying what you learn, because application is what bridges the gap between information and results. And as you continue on this journey, you will begin to see that learning is no longer a separate activity. It becomes integrated into your daily life, into your decisions, into your actions, and into your long-term strategy. And this integration is what creates momentum, because every new piece of knowledge builds on the previous one, every skill enhances the next, and over time this compounding effect leads to exponential growth. And this is how you move from being a consumer of information to a creator of value, from being reactive to being proactive, and from being limited by what you know to being empowered by what you can learn. And that is the true power of mastering how to interact with information, not just to understand the world, but to shape your place within it and to create a future that is driven by knowledge, intention, continuous growth. As you continue advancing through this journey of self-learning, you begin to realize that learning is not just about methods or systems. It is about building a mind that is capable of adapting, evolving in any environment. Because the ultimate goal is not just to learn one subject, but to develop the ability to learn anything. And this is where the real transformation begins, because now you are no longer dependent on structure, you are no longer waiting for guidance, you are becoming self-directed. And that is one of the most powerful shifts you can make in your life, because once you take ownership of your learning, you take ownership of your future. And this is exactly what Peter Hollins emphasizes, that the most successful learners are not the ones who follow instructions the best. They are the ones who create their own systems, who build their own frameworks, and who continuously refine their approach based on what works for them. And this is where habits begin to play a critical role, because learning is not a one-time event. It is a repeated process. And the quality of that process determines the quality of your results. And if your habits are weak, inconsistent, or unfocused, your learning will reflect that. But when your habits are strong, structured, and intentional, your learning becomes efficient, effective, and sustainable. And this is why one of the most important principles you must embrace is this: you do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems, because goals give you direction, but systems create progress. And without systems, even the strongest motivation fades. And this is where discipline becomes your greatest ally, because discipline is what allows you to continue learning even when you do not feel like it, even when it is difficult, even when progress seems slow. And this consistency is what creates momentum. And momentum is what leads to mastery. And as you begin to build these habits, you will notice that your learning becomes more automatic, more natural, and more integrated into your daily life. Because you are no longer relying on bursts of motivation, you are relying on structured routines that support your growth. And this is where time management becomes essential, because one of the biggest challenges in self-learning is not lack of resources, but lack of focus. And in a world full of distractions, the ability to concentrate on what matters is a competitive advantage. Because every moment you spend distracted is a moment you are not progressing. And this is why you must learn to manage your time intentionally, to prioritize your learning, and to eliminate unnecessary distractions, because focused time produces better results than scattered effort. And this is a key financial freedom principle as well, because the same discipline you apply to learning can be applied to building income, managing investments, and creating opportunities. And as you strengthen your ability to focus, to manage your time, and to build productive habits, you are also strengthening your ability to create value, and value is what drives income. And this is why self-discipline is not just a learning skill, it is a success skill. It is what allows you to execute consistently, to follow through on your plans, and to achieve your goals. And as you continue to refine your learning process, you will begin to understand the importance of feedback, because learning without feedback is incomplete. It is like trying to navigate without a map. And this is why you must continuously test yourself, evaluate your progress, and adjust your approach, because improvement comes from iteration, from trying, assessing, and refining. And this is where self-testing becomes one of the most powerful tools you can use, because it forces you to recall information, to apply what you have learned, and to identify areas that need improvement. And this process strengthens your memory, deepens your understanding, and accelerates your progress. And as you begin to incorporate self-testing into your routine, you will notice that your confidence increases, because you are no longer guessing about what you know, you are actively verifying it. And this clarity allows you to move forward with certainty. And this is where another powerful principle comes into play, the idea of learning by doing. Because true understanding does not come from theory alone, it comes from application, from taking what you have learned and using it in real-world situations. And this is where your knowledge becomes practical, where it becomes valuable, and where it begins to generate results. And this is especially important when it comes to financial freedom, because the marketplace does not reward what you know, it rewards what you can do. It rewards your ability to apply your knowledge to solve problems, to create solutions, and to deliver value. And this is why you must always focus on application, because application is what transforms knowledge into income. And as you continue on this path, you will begin to see that self-learning is not just about acquiring skills. It is about building a mindset of curiosity, persistence, and continuous improvement. And this mindset is what allows you to adapt, to change, to overcome challenges, and to seize opportunities. And this is what ultimately leads to long-term success. Because in a world that is constantly evolving, the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn is one of the most valuable skills you can possess. And as you develop this ability, you will find that your confidence grows, your capabilities expand, and your opportunities increase. Because you are no longer limited by what you currently know, you are empowered by what you can learn. And this is where you begin to experience a new level of freedom, because you are no longer dependent on external systems. You are self-sufficient, self-directed, and continuously evolving. And this is what Peter Hollins ultimately teaches, that the power of self-learning is not just in the knowledge you gain, but in the control it gives you over your own life. Because when you can teach yourself anything, you can become anything. And that is the foundation of both personal success and financial independence, because it gives you the ability to continuously create value, to adapt to changing circumstances, and to build a future that is not limited by your past, but defined by your potential. And as you continue to apply these principles, remember this, the more you learn, the more you earn. But only if you apply what you learn, because learning without action is wasted potential, but learning combined with action is the formula for growth, success, and lasting freedom. As you continue this journey into mastering self-learning, you begin to discover a deeper layer that most people never reach. And that is the understanding that learning is not just about effort or discipline. It is about strategy. Because without the right strategy, even the hardest work can lead to slow or inconsistent progress. And this is where Peter Hollins introduces one of the most critical shifts in thinking, that learning is a skill in itself, and like any skill, it can be optimized, refined, and accelerated. And this realization changes everything, because now you are no longer just trying to learn faster. You are learning how to learn better, and this distinction is what separates average learners from exceptional ones. And as you begin to adopt this perspective, you start to see that the way you approach information determines the results you get, because your brain is not designed to absorb everything equally. It is designed to prioritize, to filter, and to retain what it finds meaningful. And this is why one of the most powerful strategies you can use is chunking, the process of breaking down complex information into smaller, manageable pieces. Because when information is organized into meaningful chunks, it becomes easier to understand, easier to remember, and easier to apply. And this is how experts are able to process large amounts of information quickly, not because they are smarter, but because they have trained their minds to recognize patterns, to group related concepts, and to simplify complexity. And this is a skill you can develop with practice. And as you begin to apply it, you will notice that subjects that once felt overwhelming become more approachable, more structured, and more manageable. And this is where your confidence begins to grow, because confidence is not just about belief, it is about competence. And competence comes from understanding, and understanding comes from structure. And this is why creating mental models becomes one of your greatest advantages. Because mental models allow you to organize information into frameworks that you can easily recall and apply. And these frameworks act as shortcuts for your brain, reducing the cognitive load required to process new information. And this is what allows you to learn faster and more effectively. Because instead of starting from scratch every time you're building on existing structures, and this is one of the most important financial freedom principles you can apply, that leverage is not just external, it is internal. Because when you build strong mental frameworks, you are leveraging your own knowledge, allowing you to create more value with less effort. And as you continue to refine your learning strategy, you will begin to see the importance of spacing and repetition, because learning is not a one-time event. It is a process that unfolds over time, and this is where spaced repetition becomes incredibly powerful, because it aligns with how your brain naturally retains information. By revisiting concepts at increasing intervals, you strengthen your memory and ensure that what you learn stays with you long term. And this is far more effective than cramming. Because cramming may give you short-term results, but it does not create lasting understanding. And this is why consistency always outperforms intensity, because small, repeated efforts lead to long-term retention and mastery. And this principle applies not only to learning, but also to building wealth. Because just as knowledge compounds over time, so does money. And those who consistently invest in their skills and their knowledge are able to create opportunities that others cannot see. And this is how self-learning becomes a tool for financial growth, because it allows you to continuously upgrade your abilities to stay ahead of changes and to adapt to new challenges. And as you begin to integrate these strategies into your daily routine, you will notice that your learning becomes more efficient, more effective, and more aligned with your goals, because you are no longer relying on random effort. You are using proven methods that maximize your results. And this is where another key principle emerges: the importance of focus. Because even the best strategies cannot compensate for a lack of attention. And in a world filled with distractions, the ability to focus deeply on a single task becomes a rare and valuable skill. And this is why you must learn to create an environment that supports your learning, to eliminate distractions, to set clear boundaries, and to dedicate uninterrupted time to your growth. Because deep focus allows you to process information at a higher level, to make connections more quickly, and to achieve a state of flow where learning feels almost effortless. And this is where your productivity increases dramatically, because you are no longer switching between tasks. You are fully immersed in what you are doing, and this immersion is what leads to breakthroughs, to insights, and to deeper understanding. And as you continue to develop this ability, you will begin to see that your learning is no longer limited by time. It is amplified by focus, and this amplification is what creates exponential growth, because every hour of focused learning produces results that would take multiple hours of distracted effort. And this is one of the most powerful advantages you can develop because it allows you to progress faster, to achieve more, and to create value at a higher level. And this is where learning becomes directly connected to financial freedom. Because the marketplace rewards those who can produce results efficiently, and efficiency comes from mastery, and mastery comes from focused, strategic learning. And as you continue on this path, you will begin to realize that the real goal is not just to acquire knowledge, but to build a system that allows you to continuously acquire, process, and apply knowledge throughout your life. And this system becomes your greatest asset because it gives you the ability to adapt to any situation, to learn any skill, and to create opportunities regardless of external circumstances. And this is what true independence looks like. Not just financial independence, but intellectual independence. The ability to think for yourself, to learn for yourself, and to direct your own path. And as you integrate these principles into your life, remember this powerful idea: the more efficiently you learn, the more effectively you live, because learning is not separate from life, it is the foundation of it. And when you master the science of self-learning, you unlock the ability to continuously improve, to continuously grow, and to continuously create a life that reflects your highest potential. And that is where the true power of this journey lies. Not just in what you know, but in what you are capable of becoming through the deliberate and strategic development of your mind. As you continue advancing through this path of mastering self-learning, you begin to uncover a deeper and often overlooked truth. And that is this: learning is not just about acquiring knowledge or building systems. It is about managing your energy, your attention, and your mental state. Our attention. Because even the best strategies, the most powerful techniques, and the most structured systems will fail if your mind is not in the right condition to absorb, process, and apply information. And this is where Peter Hollins introduces a critical dimension of learning that many ignore: the role of mental performance. Because your brain is not a machine that can operate at peak capacity indefinitely. It is a biological system that requires balance, recovery, and optimization. And once you understand this, you begin to approach learning differently. Not as a constant grind, but as a cycle of focused effort and deliberate recovery. Because true productivity is not about how long you can work. It is about how effectively you can work during the time you are fully engaged. And this is where the concept of cognitive load becomes essential. And because your brain has a limited capacity to process information at any given moment, and when that capacity is exceeded, your performance declines, your attention decreases, and your frustration increases. And this is why so many people feel overwhelmed when trying to learn new things. Not because the material is too difficult, but because they are overloading their cognitive system without giving it time to process and consolidate information. And this is where strategic breaks become a powerful tool. Because stepping away from focused work allows your brain to organize and integrate what you have learned, and this process often leads to insights that would not have occurred during continuous effort. And this is why some of your best ideas come when you are not actively thinking about the problem, because your subconscious mind is still working in the background, connecting dots and forming solutions. And this is one of the most powerful principles you can apply, not just in learning, but in life. That rest is not the opposite of productivity. It is a part of it. And when you begin to respect this balance, your learning becomes more sustainable, more effective, and less stressful. And this is also where the importance of environment becomes clear, because your surroundings have a direct impact on your ability to focus, to think clearly, and to retain information. And if your environment is filled with distractions, noise, and interruptions, your brain is constantly shifting attention, and this reduces the depth of your learning. But when you create an environment that supports focus, that minimizes distractions, and that signals to your brain that it is time to learn. Your efficiency increases dramatically. And this is why designing your environment is not a luxury, it is a necessity, because it directly influences your performance, and this principle extends beyond learning into financial success as well. Because the environments you place yourself in, the people you surround yourself with, and the information you consume all shape your thinking, your decisions, and ultimately your results. And this is why one of the most powerful financial freedom principles is that your environment shapes your income more than your intentions. Because if you are constantly exposed to distractions, negativity, or low standards, it becomes much harder to maintain focus, discipline, and growth. But when you intentionally design your environment to support your goals, everything becomes easier because you are no longer fighting against your surroundings, you are working with them. And as you continue to refine your learning process, you will begin to see the importance of mental energy management, because not all hours of the day are equal. There are times when your mind is sharper, more focused, and more capable of deep work. And there are times when it is better suited for lighter tasks. And understanding this rhythm allows you to align your learning with your natural energy cycles, maximizing your productivity and minimizing fatigue. And this is where self-awareness becomes a critical skill. Because the more you understand your own patterns, your strengths, and your limitations, the more effectively you can design your learning process. And this personalization is what makes self-learning so powerful, because you are not following a one-size-fits-all system. Say, creating a system that works for you. And as you continue to apply these principles, you will notice that your ability to sustain focus improves, your attention increases, and your overall experience becomes more enjoyable. Because you are no longer forcing yourself through inefficient methods, you are working in alignment with how your brain naturally functions. And this alignment is what creates long-term success, because it allows you to continue learning without burnout, without frustration, and without losing motivation. And this is where another important principle comes into play, the importance of curiosity. Because curiosity is the fuel that drives self-learning. It is what keeps you engaged, what pushes you to explore, and what makes the process enjoyable. And when you are genuinely curious, learning becomes effortless. Because you are not forcing yourself to focus, you are naturally drawn to the subject. And this is why one of the most valuable habits you can develop is asking better questions. Because questions direct your attention. They guide your thinking, and they determine what you learn. And as you improve the quality of your questions, you improve the quality of your learning. And this is where you begin to experience a shift from obligation to exploration, from forced effort to natural engagement. And this shift is what makes learning sustainable, because it transforms it from something you have to do into something you want to do. And as you continue on this path, you will begin to realize that self-learning is not just about acquiring skills or knowledge. It is about building a lifestyle. A way of living that is centered around growth, curiosity, and continuous improvement. And this lifestyle is what ultimately leads to both personal and financial success, because it ensures that you are always evolving, always adapting, and always moving forward. And this is what gives you a lasting advantage in a world that is constantly changing, because while others may struggle to keep up, you are already equipped with the tools, the mindset, and the systems needed to learn, to grow, and to succeed. And this is where the true power of self-learning reveals itself, not just as a method, but as a way of life, a way of thinking, and a way of creating a future that is driven by knowledge, intention, and continuous progress. And as you integrate these ideas into your daily routine, remember this powerful quote: "Our ability to learn faster than others is the ultimate competitive advantage," because in a world where change is constant, the ability to adapt quickly is what determines who thrives and who falls behind. And when you master this ability, you are no longer limited by what you know today. You are empowered by what you can learn tomorrow. And that is where true freedom begins. Not just financial freedom, but intellectual and personal freedom, the freedom to grow, to evolve, and to shape your life on your own terms through the deliberate and consistent application of learning principles that align with your highest potential. As you arrive at this final stage of the journey, everything begins to come together with a level of clarity that was not possible before. And you start to realize that self-learning is not just a collection of techniques, not just a set of habits, and not even just a mindset. It is a complete transformation of how you approach life itself, because at its core, self-learning is about taking full responsibility for your growth, your skills, your knowledge, and ultimately your future. And this realization is both empowering and demanding because it removes all excuses, it eliminates dependency, and it places the control entirely in your hands. And while that level of responsibility can feel heavy at first, it is also the source of your greatest freedom, because when you understand that you can learn anything, you are no longer limited by what you currently know. You are only limited by your willingness to learn, to adapt, and to persist. And this is where the true power of self-learning reveals itself, because it shifts your identity from someone who consumes information to someone who creates value. From someone who waits for direction to someone who defines their own path. And this shift is what separates those who remain stagnant from those who continuously grow. Because growth is no longer something that happens to you. It becomes something you actively pursue, something you design, and something you control. And as you begin to operate from this level of awareness, you will notice that your relationship with challenges changes completely, because challenges are no longer obstacles. They become opportunities to expand your knowledge, to refine your skills, and to strengthen your mindset. And this is one of the most important psychological advantages you can develop, because it removes fear, it replaces hesitation with curiosity, and it allows you to move forward even in the face of uncertainty. And this is where resilience becomes a natural byproduct of self-learning. Because when you are constantly learning, constantly adapting, and constantly improving, setbacks lose their power, they become temporary, they become lessons. And they become part of the process rather than something to avoid. And this is exactly how high performers think. They do not fear failure, they use it, they analyze it, and they grow from it. And this is a critical financial freedom principle as well, because in the pursuit of wealth, in the pursuit of building something meaningful, setbacks are inevitable. And those who succeed are not those who avoid them, but those who learn from them faster than others. And this is why your ability to learn quickly and effectively becomes one of your greatest assets. Because it allows you to recover faster, to adapt faster, and to capitalize on opportunities that others might miss. And as you continue to integrate everything you have learned, you begin to see that self-learning is not just about acquiring knowledge, but about building a system for continuous improvement. A system that allows you to evolve with changing circumstances, to stay relevant in a dynamic world, and to consistently increase the value you can provide. And this is where self-learning becomes directly tied to financial independence. Because in a world where skills determine income, the ability to continuously acquire new skills gives you an unlimited capacity to grow, to pivot, and to create new opportunities. And this is why one of the most powerful principles you can adopt is this: invest in yourself more than anything else. Because the returns on self-investment are exponential, they compound over time, and they cannot be taken away from you. And as you continue to apply these principles, you will begin to notice that your confidence reaches a new level, not because you know everything, but because you trust your ability to figure things out. And this trust is what allows you to take risks, to step into new areas, and to pursue opportunities that once seemed out of reach. And this is where your life begins to expand, because you are no longer constrained by fear or uncertainty. You are guided by curiosity, by growth, and by the belief that you can learn whatever is necessary to succeed. And this belief is what fuels long-term success, because it ensures that you are always moving forward, always improving, and always evolving. And as you reflect on this journey, you begin to understand that the ultimate goal was never just to learn faster or to retain more information. It was to become the kind of person who is capable of continuous growth, the kind of person who seeks knowledge, who applies it, and who uses it to create value. And this is where everything connects, because when you create value, you create opportunities. When you create opportunities, you create income. And when you create income consistently, you create financial freedom. And this is the deeper connection between self-learning and success. Because it is not just about what you know, it is about what you can do with what you know. And as you continue forward, remember this powerful idea: the illiterate of the future are not those who cannot read or write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. Because in a world that is constantly changing, the ability to adapt is more valuable than any static knowledge. And this is the skill that will define your future, because those who can adapt will thrive, and those who cannot will struggle to keep up. And as you embrace this fully, as you commit to continuous learning, to continuous improvement, and to continuous growth, you step into a new level of control over your life, a level where you are no longer reacting to circumstances but actively shaping them. And this is the ultimate freedom, not just financial freedom, but intellectual and personal freedom, the freedom to think for yourself, to learn for yourself, and to create a life that reflects your highest potential. And that is the final lesson. That self-learning is not just a skill, it is a lifelong advantage, a powerful tool that allows you to continuously evolve, to continuously succeed, and to continuously move closer to the life you truly want. And once you master it, there is no limit to what you can achieve because your growth becomes limitless, your potential becomes expandable, and your future becomes something you consciously create rather than something you passively accept.